You live in the richest country on earth, so why does it feel like you're getting poorer? Because what you've been told about the economy isn't the full story. When you hear the phrase resource curse, you probably picture Venezuela or the Congo, places where massive oil reserves somehow equal massive poverty. But what if I told you the exact same economic disease is tearing apart the United States right now? Look at this map. The U.S. has every natural advantage on Earth. Endless arable land, oceans of oil, deep water ports. Yet, the American middle class is bleeding out. Now look down here, Uruguay. It has basically nothing in the ground. No massive oil reserves. No rare earth minerals, just grass and cows. Yet it has the strongest, most secure middle class in the entire hemisphere. How does a country with practically nothing beat a superpower that has absolutely everything? It's not a geographical accident, it's a heist. While Washington pumps billions into subsidizing legacy fossil fuels and letting Wall Street extract wealth without actually building anything, Uruguay quietly rewrote the rule. They realized competing on physical volume was a sucker's game, so they shifted to the only commodity that matters, intellectual capital. Actually, let me rephrase that. They didn't just shift, they engineered an escape route. Today, we're going to look at the exact moment a tiny South American nation outsmarted the giants and why the so-called bedrock of the American economy is actually actively poisoning your wallet. But before we pull apart the data, I need to ask you something. Who is actually richer? A country that pumps millions of barrels of oil but leaves its citizens drowning in debt? Or a country with zero oil that guarantees a high standard of living for everyone? Let me know whose side you are on in the comments. Let's dig in. We have this myth in America. Dig it up, grow it, pump it, and wealth will naturally trickle down to your paycheck. Big ag, big oil, and legacy banking rely heavily on this narrative. If you sit down with the executives running these sectors and ask them why they deserve billions in federal subsidies, they'll give you a very reasonable-sounding excuse. They'll look you in the eye and say, "We provide the cheap physical bedrock that allows the U.S. economy to function. You can't run a global superpower on software and services alone. We keep the lights on and the food cheap." It sounds logical, but look at the numbers from Exxon or Chevron. Wait, don't even look at the profits. Look at what they actually do with the profits. Instead of reinvesting in infrastructure or raising wages for the middle class, they funnel tens of billions into stock buybacks. They are financially strip mining the country. The physical bedrock in the U.S. isn't supporting you. It's actively poisoning the economic water supply through suppressed wages and extracted wealth. You get cheaper gas, maybe, but you can't afford a house. That is the American resource curse. You live in the wealthiest country in human history, but you don't get to keep the wealth. Now, let's jump 5,000 miles south. Uruguay realized decades ago that if they tried to play the American game, competing on physical volume, they would get crushed. They had beef and wool. That's it. And you can't build a 21st century middle class on beef. So, the government made a highly controversial pivot. They passed massive tax incentives to create free trade IT zones. But here is the catch. Tax breaks don't work if your population doesn't know how to code. Enter the Siebel Plan. They gave every single public school kid a laptop in 2007. I mean, think about that for a second. Back when we were still arguing about flip phones and whether social media was a passing fad, Uruguay was handing out broadband and hardware to farm kids. They didn't just tweak their economy, they completely rewired their population's brain. Simultaneously, they transitioned their national energy grid. Today, Uruguay runs on roughly 98% renewable energy. They don't have to buy foreign oil, and they aren't held hostage by legacy fossil fuel monopolies. They eliminated the physical cost of running a country. and that freed up massive amounts of capital to invest in human beings. Here is the exact moment the timeline split. Right around the early 2010s, Uruguay's software exports began outpacing their traditional reliance on agriculture. They became the #1 software exporter per capita in South America. Wealth wasn't concentrated in the hands of 3 oil barons or meatpacking monopolies. It was distributed across thousands of tech hubs, startups, and a highly educated middle class. Back in the US, what were we doing? Financializing everything. Wall Street figured out how to extract wealth from the middle class without producing a single line of tangible software or service value. We turned housing into a speculative stock market. We turned healthcare into a private equity playground. Uruguay invested in the mind. The US subsidized the ground. You can see the result on the streets right now. Walk through Montevideo. You won't see fleets of superyachts, but you also won't see sprawling tent cities. You see stability. You see a population that isn't absolutely terrified of a random medical bill bankrupting their family. The legacy industries in the US desperately want you to believe that a strong economy requires dirty hands and physical extraction. They want you to think it's normal to be squeezed, but the data proves them wrong. The highest return on investment in the modern world doesn't come from a drill bit. It comes from intellectual capital. We are living through a massive wealth transfer, disguised as business as usual. The United States has every natural resource on the planet, and yet you probably feel poorer today than you did 5 years ago. Uruguay proved that the American dream didn't die. It just relocated to a place willing to invest in its people rather than its dirt. So I'll ask you again, who is actually richer? The nation with all the oil or the nation with all the ideas? Tell me your choice down below. Subscribe if you want to understand how the global economy is actually played. See you next time.